Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode. Oh, I'm smiling so big. It's been a minute since I just sat down and talked into the good old Mikey microphone. And I'm doing it in a little new special room. And by new and special, I mean my guest room that I have operated out of for a long time. But normally I record my podcast in my husband's office. And today I said, no, let me pop in here and change the scenery. And I'm really comfy. I'm sitting on this little swivel couch and I have my microphone in tow. And that's besides the point. The point of today's episode is to give a little bit of information on my pregnancy, my birth story, and postpartum. And so pretty much this one is for the ladies. I love you guys. To all my men who are listening, if you are interested in this, keep on listening. But if not, I understand. I, for a long time, thought that I wouldn't really talk too much about my own birth story just because, I don't know, who cares? I didn't think anybody cared. But actually, I've gotten enough questions online that I thought this might be kind of worth exploring and talking about. And I think, well, I don't know. And I think by talking about it openly, sometimes that can make it seem a little less scary, a little less daunting for somebody that might be going through it right now. I know that I have been fortunate enough to be a resource to some of my good friends that are pregnant right now that just have all the questions. And while I definitely don't have all the answers, I can speak from my own experience. So that's what I'm going to be doing for the next, 20, 30 minutes. And I want to start with a very obvious disclaimer, but I feel like I have to say it because it's the internet and it's the world that we live in. I'm going to be speaking from my experience. Okay. I'm not a medical doctor. I can't give medical advice. This is just what happened for me, how I moved my body, how I lived my life. And it could very well be very different the second time around. And that's okay. This is just what my experience was over the past year. And I'm excited to delve into it. So many thanks to someone who sent me a direct message. Like I said, there's been a few, but this person reached out and they said, can you do a pod on your birth story and prep? Pregnant and inspired by how you move/live your life. First of all, so sweet. Secondly, in knowing that I was going to be posting this podcast and recording, I thought, let me do a little Q&A session at the end. So we have a few questions that were written in already. I will cover those at the end if they're not already covered in the story that I'm about to tell. I guess we can talk a little bit first on how I stayed moving, because I think my level of activity boded well for my level of mobility when it came time to push the baby out and move around, at 41 weeks pregnant. So I stayed very active throughout my pregnancy. As many of you might know, actually you might not know, I was not sick at all during my pregnancy. And so that was very fortunate. I think I just got the lucky draw because people get really nauseous and sick, especially that first, second trimester, sometimes the second, sometimes all three. And that can greatly inhibit the amount that you want to move and sweat and be out of breath. But I fortunately wasn't sick. And so my exercise didn't change too much. There was a short period where I had a subchorionic hemorrhage or hematoma, sorry. And that restricted my activity level for about 6 weeks in the very beginning. And that was pretty much it. I stayed weightlifting probably 4 days a week, 2 upper, 2 lower. I would do 2 days by myself weightlifting and then 2 days with a personal trainer who is a friend of mine and was just excited to have me continuously come every Tuesday and Thursday throughout my pregnancy. So I stayed super active intentionally and then also sort of unintentionally with my job. I'm a physical therapist, as you guys might have heard, and I was in the clinic 5 days a week at that time, also onboarding my physical therapist. So lots of movement, lots of up, down, all around, twisty turning. And that was difficult as I got bigger, as I expanded. But I also was aware of the benefits of it. Aside from the benefits of it applying to, my unborn baby and my pregnant self, for me, it was very much the mental benefit of I have to continue exercising because my life is kind of crazy and I'm busy, and being able to work really hard at something and like just absolutely annihilate myself in the gym makes me feel really good mentally. It's like I have nothing else to focus on but picking up this weight from the ground, because if I don't focus, form could be off. And so that's a long-winded way of me saying I stayed active. And even up until the later weeks where I kind of was expecting myself to not be able to do much by the end of it. I remember telling the CrossFit gym owner at the time, I said, look, I'm going to probably come until my second trimester and then I'll be done. But I just kept going because I was feeling good. Oh, so I guess I should mention that I also was going to CrossFit once, maybe twice a week. So probably active 6 days a week. And on the 7th day, I rest. No, I'm just joking. I would walk, I would be moving. I was a moving girl. And so when we think about birth prep, I think Gemma was so low in my body. She was so low. I remember going to my 35-week ultrasound or whenever it was. It was later on. And the ultrasound tech looked at me and she goes, girl, how the hell are you still walking? And I was like, excuse me? Do I need to be hospitalized? Is she okay? She was super down in there. And I'm sure that has something to do with genetics, but it also might have to do with the fact that gravity was just continuously pushing down at 9.81 meters per second because I was upright and I was moving. Now that I'm thinking back about my activity level at that time, there was this video I posted that went viral. I'm talking millions of views, which doesn't happen for me often. And it was a video of me at 41 weeks. I was probably 40 weeks and 6 days. And I was like me trying to get my baby out. And I was jumping on this trampoline that I have, like this little mini trampoline. And I was curb stomping super intensely. Wait, is curb stomping the word? Curb walking. Sorry, guys. Curb walking. Anyways, can you tell I'm recording this after the hour of 7 p.m.? A lot of what I was focusing on in the last 5 or 6 weeks were hip external rotation, hip internal rotation, stretches, deep breathing in like the down dog position, and the happy baby stretch. Anything to breathe into the pelvic floor, essentially, and sort of down train those muscles and tune into them and ensure that I'm relaxing. Because at the end of the day, I know that those muscles need to relax and get out of the way for sweet baby's head to push through and her shoulders. So that was a lot of what I was focusing on. But I will say that I have this resting level of mobility that is fortunate. I think my history of gymnastics and dance has blended really nicely into, it blended really nicely into birth prep because I already am super mobile in the hips. And so that wasn't something that I really had to harness or work on. But I think if I were to tell somebody what to do and they didn't have as mobile hips, I would say that that is something to be focusing on a little bit. I think now is a good time to bring up the idea of a birth plan. I don't know if other people listening who have maybe have had kids went into birth prep, pregnancy with a birth plan, but I did not know what that even was until I was at my OB's office. And she was like, do you have a birth plan? And I was like, well, my plan was to have her and like push her out. What's your plan? I had no idea what that meant. Like, what do you mean a plan? I thought you had the plan. You're the professional. I'm just going to show up. So anyways, that was a fun journey for me to realize that I had to have a plan in place, sort of. And I guess let's talk about that. So my plan was, once I figured out that I needed a plan, was to go to 40 weeks. 41 weeks max was what the doctor's recommendation was. And I was like, okay, I trust you. You're the pro. And I wanted to do an unmedicated birth. I wanted her to come at her own will. And I wanted to be able to push her out without any help. I didn't want an epidural. I didn't want anything. I really was like, let me see what this is all about. What is the human body capable? What have women been doing for the past millennia, And so that was my plan. And I was a little nervous about not doing an epidural because I wasn't sure what that looked like. My mom has had 5 kids without any epidural. And so she tried to give me an explanation, but memory is a fickle thing, and I don't think she fully can recount the events of all 5 births very well. She's like, "Oh, it was beautiful. It was a blessing." And I'm like, "No, mom. No, but tell me what it felt like." And so I talked to my OB. I said, "Is this something that people do here?" She was like, "Yeah, Ronnie, like probably 1 in 5 people do that." I'm like, "Okay, cool, cool. Great." So that's my plan. And my husband was on board, and that was pretty much it. I just was like, "Hey, let's do as little interventions as possible and see what happens." So fast forward, we're at 41 weeks on the nose, and I'm like, I got to get induced, which, you know, I like to think of myself as an educated person, but I also didn't really know what induced meant. There's all these things that you have to look up. You just got to look them up because no one explains what induced means. So I have to go in and I have to get induced. And funny enough, a little backstory on this one, I got the induction date wrong. And all week I'm telling people, yep, I'm getting induced on Thursday. I go in on Thursday. No. Hospital calls me on Monday. They're like, just prepping for your arrival Wednesday night at 11:50 p.m. I was like, no, no, no. I can't. I'm not ready. They were like, ma'am, we it's a full hospital. Like, you have to come in on your scheduled date. And I was like, can you push it? She's like, let me call you back. They did not push it. But also, what's up with getting induced in the middle of the gosh darn night? I mean, I was sitting in the hospital bed, they're putting an IV in me, and it's midnight. I was like, this is so past my bedtime. What are we doing? Anyways, I digress. I have to get induced. But here's the funny thing about it. And the universe is such a cool thing. Everything aligned quite perfectly because I'm on a walk. My mom's in town. She's like, I will be there for you whenever you need me. She comes in town. We go for a walk, me, Adam, my mom, my dog. And I'm like, I feel funny. Something feels amiss. I think my water broke. Now, I thought my water broke for weeks leading up to that because every time I stood up from the kitchen table to get something, I would pee my pants. And I would be like, oh, she's coming. And then I'd be like, oh, no. Never mind. I just pissed myself. But in this moment, on this walk, I was like, no, she feels very like something's different. So anyway, I ignore it. We go out to dinner because I'm like, whatever. I'm getting induced tonight anyway. Adam takes me out to dinner. It's our last date before the baby comes. And it was kind of fun. We told the waitress, I was like, hey, what do you recommend I get? I'm going to get induced later tonight. She's like, let me look at my menu options and see what would be good for that. Anyways, I go in and I tell the nurse, I'm like, I think my water broke. So she does a little strip test, the little litmus test. And sure enough, she's like, oh, that is not urine. That is amniotic fluid. You have popped. I was like, sweet. So this was the perfect timing. This was exactly what I wanted because I was really sad to not have gone into labor naturally, which is totally normal and it happens all the time. But I was like, damn, I really thought that Gemma would come, on her own accord and not have to be forced out, but whatever. And so I went in and they still had to start the induction process because yes, my water broke, but I was not having any contractions. I think that this is a good detail to cover because I don't think a lot of people think about what induction is going to feel like or how long it's going to last. Okay. They tell me we're going to put you on Pitocin and we're going to start you on a drip. And then she tells me, try to get some sleep. I was like, try to get some, what do you mean? I thought I was going to be pushing soon. No, it's a titrated process where they start you on a little bit of Pitocin. And I actually literally did get some sleep. And that was awesome because historically, not a great sleeper, especially not with an IV in my arm and things beeping and the impending feeling of a baby about to be pulled from my body. I mean, that's not something that would typically induce sleep, but I slept. And I woke up at 7 something in the morning and I was like, okay, yeah, I'm starting to feel some contractions. They're like, great, up the Pitocin some more. I'm like, yeah, I'm feeling them. Yep, there they are. She's like, perfect. So in my mind, because everybody talks about how contractions are supposed to be, a couple of minutes apart, maybe 90 seconds apart, maybe 30 seconds apart. That's what I thought I was going to experience. But no, I was feeling a contraction basically every 10 seconds. And the nurse came in and saw the look on my face and she was like, "Oh, okay, we got to take you off this now." It was so intense. I was like, where is my break? I was hoping for a break. I was hoping for a little sip of ice water. Maybe we listen to some classical music, maybe some Eminem, I don't know, 50 Cent, whatever I'm feeling. There was no time for me to break. So when they took me off the Pitocin, it was more chill and I was having regular labor contractions. We'll just go long story short. I was at maybe 4 centimeters, and then an half hour later, I was at 10. She came so fast. I remember being like, even if at this point I decided I want to have an epidural, there's no way, there's no time. And I did reserve that right. I told my husband, I said, look, if I'm having the absolute worst time or I'm having the longest labor of my life, I would like to get an epidural so that I can relax, you know? Um, but I didn't have to because she came so freaking quickly. I think I was in full on labor contractions for maybe an hour and a half, pushed 3 times, and out she came. And it was kind of cool because the hospital had this contraption where you can hold on to this bar overhead and basically be in a deep squat. And you guys know I love a deep squat. I was able to push in a deep squat and get her out. And honestly, she came so fast. Adam, my husband, had to glove up and he was able to catch her. And the doctor was like, "Oh my God, it's happening." Happened quick. It was awesome. And highly recommend. No, I'm just kidding. It was a good time. It was, when I look back on it and people ask, "Oh, how bad was the pain?" I was telling my PT this the other day. It's hard for me to say the pain scale. It was more overwhelming than it was painful. I remember thinking I was expecting this pain to be a 10 out of 10, and it was like a 9. And the overwhelming sensation was what was really unexpected. And oh my gosh, let me give this little tip or trick. If someone's trying to do unmedicated delivery, I held a comb in my hand. Someone told me this. Shout out to whoever told me this on Instagram. Someone slid up and was like, "Hey, if you bring a comb and squeeze it in your hand when you're having contractions, it'll help." Oh, yeah. I pretty much almost punctured through the skin, but it helps me so much. And just breathing and getting through it. My sister came in the room at one point, was like fanning me with a folder. I didn't even know she was coming, but that helped. Anyways, that's the birth story. It was fantastic. It's also one of those things I realized you can never plan for perfectly. I think anybody that goes in with a birth plan knows that that's probably not how it's going to go, but that's just your ideal situation, right? Like ideally, I wouldn't get induced, but I still did. And it's beautiful no matter which way it unfolds, truly. I think whether I had epidural, C-section, like whatever, as long as Gemma arrived safely and I could get home the next day, I was like, okay, I'm cool. We're good. So that's on birth story. The last thing I'll touch on before I answer the questions from the crowd is, what did I do postpartum to recover? Again, this is going to be very case dependent because I had minimal tearing. I had a natural birth. I didn't have a C-section. So my recovery is going to look different from somebody else. Somebody else who, ran a marathon pregnant is going to recover different than me, who's going to recover different from somebody who was bedridden the entire time because they were so sick, But I was pretty intentional with my gradual return to movement. I remember even making videos in the early days, like 1 week postpartum, because I was so bored. People don't tell you how often babies sleep. She slept so much. She was always napping, and I was just always either breastfeeding or sitting around. So, anyways, I was very intentional about the movement early on being almost nothing for the first 2 weeks. And then at about 3 weeks, getting into just things to move my joints. I mean, I remember feeling so stiff. I was like, God, I went from being so active to sitting around so much that I am just having joint pain. Like I'm feeling stiff. I'm feeling weak. I'm feeling uncomfortable. My knees are aching. My back is aching. So it was your, open book, cat cow, glute bridge, hip hinge, small things that felt good to me, a little walk down the driveway, up the driveway, because guys, my driveway is steep. Those things were really important early on. Diaphragmatic breathing, connecting with my core, keeping the spine in neutral, like doing nothing crazy. I didn't lift a weight until I was probably 5 weeks postpartum, and I didn't go back to full on personal training, or I didn't go back to CrossFit until I was like 8 weeks, and weightlifting maybe 6 to the personal training gym. And running, I think I was 10 because I just knew my pelvic floor was not going to handle it. And honestly, that is something that I'm still working on, is just the endurance of the pelvic floor, because that trauma to the muscle that happens when the baby exits your body it's a long recovery. And there are still things that I'm working on. Subpubic symphysis pain from time to time with adductor specific movements, core control with dynamic movements, all that stuff. So I'm not going to sit here and bore people with like a 10-week plan of how to get back postpartum, but that is how I recovered. I think a huge, huge portion of my successful recovery came from the fact that I was so active and so mobile throughout the pregnancy. Had I not prioritized it and kind of just sat around, which I can't even imagine a universe in which there's no version of Roni that would have done that. But if I had, let's just say I had a really uncomfortable and sick pregnancy. I think my recovery would have been longer, and that's okay. But that's just where it was for me. So that's it for me. I hope that this has been a comprehensive answer to people's questions online about what pregnancy and birth and postpartum look like. I guess one thing I haven't touched on is nutrition. And I think that is, I'm not a nutritionist, but I do think that is a big portion of how I was able to build back muscle and recover well, really prioritizing whole foods, protein, hydration. I drink an element like every single day. AG1, my vitamins, like I think I really dialed it in even more postpartum, trying to eat as best I can. And I'm always on the move. And that is the way of the world for me. But we're already 20 something minutes in. Let's pull up the questions and see if any of the inquiries haven't been answered by my storytelling already. One of my favorite questions to ask guests on the podcast is, what would you tell your younger self? Sometimes I want to reverse that question and ask myself. And honestly, I would tell younger Roni, dead seriously, get Jane from day one. I remember the days when I didn't have Jane and my life was all over the place. As a new business owner, it was scary. And then not having good systems in place was even scarier. Jane handles my scheduling, documentation, online booking, billing, payments, basically everything that keeps my clinic running smoothly. So, if you're starting a practice or looking for a better system, learn from my mistake and start with Jane. You can get 2 months free using my code RONIPT2MO. All right, back to the show. Okay. Best moves to do postpartum via C-section to rebuild the core. Oh, okay. So again, kind of like I was saying earlier, I haven't had a C-section and I'm not really a pelvic floor specialist, but you should go follow Doc Lizzie, DPT. She is all about giving tips for having a C-section, like literally how to get in and out of bed after a C-section, how to breathe after a C-section. There's so many good tips that she gives. So I'm going to divert that question away to her because she is such a great resource and she has an awesome Instagram. All right, next question is how to fix/handle tech neck from nursing baby and back pain from carrying baby/toddler. This is such a good question, and it makes me think about how challenging it could be for somebody who does not ever train in the gym to go from not having a baby to having a baby, because having a baby in your life every single day is constant carrying, grabbing, lifting, bending, stooping, holding, like twisting. It's a whole array of movements that you just probably didn't do beforehand. And so therefore you really have to train for it. How to fix tech neck from nursing a baby, I don't know if there's like one fix for it. I think you have to be conscientious of the position you're in. change positions from time to time. Like, if you are constantly bending over from nursing, don't then immediately put them down and, like, stoop over and bend over on your phone for an hour, right? Like, we have to have some variety in position if we're going to alleviate the symptoms. There can't just be there's not one good fix, but I think also training postural muscles like your rhomboids, like the middle traps, like your rear delt, everything that would help kind of retract the shoulder back, that's just gonna feel really good too, because those muscles are not getting worked really when we're hunched over like that. So those felt really, really good. I remember immediately postpartum doing like lots of banded T's and Y's and lat pull downs. And I was just like, oh, this feels good. Like, it's not gonna change the structure of my neck, but it will 100% feel better and remind those muscles to activate. Okay. How were you able to stay active during pregnancy? In the first trimester, and I'm so tired. Oh my God. Yeah, I feel that. And I think I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I sometimes approach life like an absolute freight train. And especially last year when I was in the throes of new business, new podcast, new hire, I was so tired anyways that I had a hard time dissecting what was regular tiredness and what was pregnancy tiredness. I know that the first trimester symptoms hit so hard and so different for everybody, but because there was literally so much going on, I didn't do any self-reflection of like, how am I feeling? I was just like, well, I don't have any other choice. Like, I have 6 patients on my schedule today and I have to post this and I have to get this done. Like, I'm sort of a drill sergeant for my own life, and I was like, well, whatever, I got to get it done. And because I already had these habits in place of like, I just go to my personal trainer on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I just do CrossFit on Fridays. Like, it was just part of my schedule, so I didn't think much of it. Sure, I would show up to those workouts sometimes and be like, I am feeling about a 60% out of 100%. So we're going to take that knowledge and run with it, but not literally run because I'm not running. So I wouldn't attack every workout like a crazy person, but I just kept chugging along, and I don't know if I can recommend that. I think you should definitely listen to your body, but I was just like, well, full speed ahead. Okay. Next question. How far in advance do you recommend doing pelvic floor PT prior to pregnancy? Interesting. Prior to pregnancy, I don't know if I would say you 100% have to go and do that unless you're having symptoms or you are more curious about learning how the body works. Because most people shouldn't really have to think about their pelvic floor or work the pelvic floor exercises into their regular routine unless they're having pelvic pain, incontinence, X, Y, and Z. For the pregnant person, I think it's important to go to a physical therapist, even just to talk about birth plan, birth prep, relaxation techniques, hip mobility things, pain management if you're riddled with back pain or hip pain or pubic symphysis pain like I was. That stuff can be helpful. But I would say it's almost like the reverse. Like, you need it the least probably if you're not pregnant and have no symptoms. You probably could benefit from it when you're pregnant, and I would say it's the most important that you go postpartum. So that's my answer on that. If you had a natural birth, how did you prep your body physically for that? Oh, how did I prep physically for a natural birth? I don't think anything can prepare you. Here's my thought on this. And I don't mean that to be scary. I just mean there's nothing that you can do that's going to recreate the feeling of a baby leaving your body, which is a crazy, crazy feeling. It's the most overwhelming feeling in the world. It felt like every single cell in my body, every single piece of energy in me was like, push the baby out. We were pushing the baby out. It was crazy. So I think I should speak more on the mental preparation more than the physical, because it's hard to say like, well, this physically got me fit and ready to push a baby out unmedicated naturally. I'll tell you a couple things that really helped because I think this is important. And I think some of this I heard on a podcast before I gave birth. Like, what things can I do mentally to prepare? So let me just pay it forward. Number one was knowing every contraction is just one less that you're going to have before the baby comes out. So it's not like, oh, this is just the start and it's only going to get worse. It's like it's only going to get less and less. It's dwindling the amount of times that you're going to have to suffer through this. Number 2 was being really educated about what was going on in my body. I remember my doctor saying this when I first told her I wanted to do no epidural. She said, most people who come in and say they want to do it and then don't are just afraid of what's happening to them and they don't understand the pain. And I thought, what a cool way to frame that. It's like knowledge is power. If I can go in there and know, okay, this is happening because my uterus is contracting and my muscles are dilating. Like this is anatomically, physiologically, this is what's happening. This is probably where she is in the birth canal. Picturing that was such helpful information and motivation for me. So I was like, okay, this is a natural process. Like this is what my body is doing. This is normal. I think it could be really scary if you're like, it hurts. I don't know. Cause yeah, I could totally see how you could panic and then the panic would feed into the panic. That, and I watched a YouTube video. I watched give me the 3D model of what's going on inside of the birth canal. And that really helped. And I think third and final would be having really good body awareness of, am I relaxed? Am I clenched? Is my jaw clenched? I remember hearing something about how if the jaw is clenched, that can inadvertently lead to pelvic floor clenching too, which is then potentially going to lead to more tearing or difficulty with birth. And so really working on breathing through the contractions, like deep breaths, diaphragmatic breaths, all of my lungs expanding and just being like, oh, okay, this is just something hard that my body has to go through physically, temporarily, but the reward will be great. And it was. So I don't think that really answered the physically, how did you prepare? But it's not so much physical. It's like mentally, how can I manage? And that is how I managed. All right, let's see if we've got any more questions. We are coming to the tail end of this podcast episode. Last question. What positions did you feel like helped during birth the most? Oh, this is a good one. And I didn't cover this. I did cover the squat, but everyone's different. I've said it before. I'll say it again. Everyone's different. The pregnancy ball, I was like, get that thing away from me. I tried to sit on it and bounce around and I was like, I want to throw this thing out the window. Like I hated it for some reason. I was like, this is not helping. For me, because I was able to move around, I was like experimenting with a lot of things. I was like, what are we doing? How am I going to be moving? And being on all fours was the only way that I was comfortable for a long time. I would just like rock back and forth on all fours and just be like, okay, the end is near. And that was pretty much it. I'd walk around a little bit and then I'd like bend over and be like, okay. And that was pretty much it. All fours and deep squat were my top 2. Can confirm. And laying on your back, just a little FYI, at least for me, with no medication, felt like somebody was trying to suffocate me. So laying on the back was not an option for me. Guys, I think that pretty much clears up all the questions that came in that I hadn't already addressed. I hope, if anything, that this was resourceful for people. Like I said, this was something I didn't know was worth sharing at all. But because I've personally gone through it and I have somewhat of a baseline knowledge of how the body works, and I'm a huge proponent of staying active while pregnant if you can, and postpartum if you can. I don't know. I think it's worth discussing. Let me know if you guys liked the episode. If you have more questions about more specifics, please send me questions. I love to hear from you. And I do think that this concludes the episode. I'll see you guys next week.